Kính chào các ông bà, anh chị em. Welcome to ABC TV. One of the essential part of the Vietnamese meal is herbs. In my garden I've got Vietnamese mint, essential, and spring onion, more mint, and pennyworth. At my parents' home, every meal includes a bowl of herbs. There is not a meal without the essential bowl of herbs. In today's episode, we're going to invite Jonathan Cornford, a friend of mine, to come and share with us the essential ingredients or essential practices that participate in God's work of renewal. Eddie will also be coming in to talk with Sharon about simplicity. And we have a video from BepCare that celebrates our work together in providing housing for asylum seeker, which features some famous faces. But first, let's go on a tour of our gardens. Thanks everyone for sending in your beautiful images of your garden. We have enough to go on to revisit some of your gardens in the following weeks. So let's go.
We seek your kingdom throughout every sphere.
We long for heaven's demonstration here.
Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moths and vermin destroy, and where thieves break in and steal, but store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moths and vermin do not destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. The eye is the lamp of the body. If your eyes are healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eyes are unhealthy, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? No one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. Therefore, I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, or about your body, what you will wear. Is not life more than food, and the body more than clothes? Look at the birds of the air. They do not sow or reap or store away in barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not much more valuable than they? Can any one of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your life? And why do you worry about clothes? See how the flowers of the field grow. They do not labor or spin, yet I tell you that not even Solomon in all his splendor was dressed like one of these. If that is how God clothes the grass of the field, which is here today and tomorrow is thrown into the fire, will he not much more clothe you, you of little faith? So do not worry, saying, what shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or what shall we wear? For the pagans run after all these things, and your heavenly Father knows that you need them. But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well.
Hi, Eddie. It's nice to meet you. Thanks for joining us today for the service. Oh, Eddie, you're on mute. You need to turn your microphone on. Oh dear. I think this might be a very one-sided conversation. Well, while Eddie's getting organised, how about I introduce to you today the topic, which is simplicity.
I had my microphone on mute, Sharon. You should have said something. Anyway, it's lovely to meet you. I'm one of your biggest fans.
Thanks, Eddie. Nice of you to say. Hey, I was wondering if you might like to help us with today's discussion on simplicity.
Well, actually, I'm a little bit busy, but perhaps I could squeeze it in.
What are you up to?
I'm packing a suitcase for my holiday. When our lockdown finishes, I'm heading off on a road trip for a week.
Oh, that sounds so exciting. I would love to take a week off and travel. Where are you going to go?
Well, let me show you the map. There it is.
That looks pretty complicated, Eddie.
I'll start here in Ashburton, then travel to the beach at Warrnambool, then do some bushwalking at Mount Hotham, then see the penguins at Phillip Island, then visit the Weirs goat farm in central Victoria, then some fishing at Malakuta, then see the Murray River at Swan Hill, then get an ice cream at Queenscliff.
And how long did you say you were going for?
Oh, that's just the first day. You should see what I've got planned for the other 6 days.
Wow, I'm not sure I could manage that much excitement in one day. So what are you going to take with you?
Oh, I'm glad you asked, Sharon. I'm just packing my suitcase now. Maybe you could help me.
Sure. So what are you going to take to the beach?
Oh, well, let's see. Bathers, towel, T-shirts, a boogie board, hat, sunscreen, A videotape of the 1996 grand final.
Okay, Eddie, I'm really intrigued by that extra pair of hands that's helping you to pack.
Oh, that's my lovely assistant. She's very handy.
Oh, that is a terrible joke, Eddie. I really have to hand it to you.
Ha. Well, now we need to pack some things for the bushwalk at Mount Hotham. Polar fleece, boots, explorer socks, an umbrella, bushwalking pants, tent. Oh, there we go.
What about all the other places that you're going to go?
Oh, yeah. Well, we better pack some carrots.
Carrots?
Oh, yes, they're for the Weir's goats.
Oh,
Goats
yeah.
like carrots,
No.
you see.
Fair enough, fair enough.
And a fishing rod for Malakuta, so we can catch lots of fish. And for Swan Hill, I think we might need to take some fly spray. Oh, there we go. Well, eating ice cream at Queenscliff. Let me see. Oh, I know. I better take a toothbrush. Very important, boys and girls. Oh, no. Look at that huge pile of stuff in the suitcase. It's not going to fit. I'm not going to be able to close it, Sharon.
Oh, dear Eddie, I think you're going to have to start again.
This is a disaster. I need a bigger suitcase or maybe a small moving van.
Hey, Eddie, I've got an idea.
Oh, what's that?
Well, why don't you just keep it simple? Like, do you really need to pack all of that stuff? And do you even really need to go to all of those places in just one trip?
Oh, well, now you come to mention it, it would be much easier if I just went to one place. But how should I decide where to go?
Well, what's the most important thing you want to do?
I think I'd like to visit the Weirs at their goat farm.
Well, that sounds like a good idea. And so how does it feel to just make things a bit more simple?
Oh, it's very freeing, actually. I feel like a great load has been lifted from my shoulders.
Well, you know what? Sometimes it's like that when we listen to God. So like clearing all the clutter from our minds and setting aside all that stuff that competes for our attention actually helps us to get to know God better. And I think God likes that because he actually wants to be our friend.
Oh, I think I've learned something about keeping things simple today, Sharon. Thanks very much.
No worries. I am so glad we had this chance to catch up. Hey, all the best with your packing for your holiday.
Well, I'm just going to go and pack the carrots now.
Excellent. See you soon.
Bye.
There are at least 5,500 people seeking asylum in Victoria, and many are not eligible for income support or any government funding. Many, like Thomas, find themselves homeless.
Back in Nigeria, where I come from, I practice as an architect and I do mainly design and construction. Also, I do paintings. I work on different mediums. What I experienced when I first came here was quite difficult for me. No income, no work, no subsidy from anywhere. I was having issues with accommodation, and at the point I was homeless.
Stories like Thomas are not uncommon. How are we to respond as the people of God in this land we call Australia? In Ezekiel 47, God instructs his people to accept refugees and afford them the same foundations of economic security that they themselves enjoy, to treat them as equals. They shall be to you as citizens. Jesus echoes this same command in the parable of the Good Samaritan. The Good Samaritan who came to the aid of someone not from his own tribe, but rather a stranger in need of help. Including the stranger and welcoming the refugee is a powerful biblical ethic and a practical expression of the love of God and the mission of Jesus, that is threaded through so many parts of the New and the Old Testaments. As you think of your own missional calling, as a community of followers of Jesus, what does it mean for you to give welcome and hope to people like Thomas?
Since 2008, Bapcare Sanctuary program has provided housing and support to people seeking asylum. In 2015, community-based housing was added to the program. Sanctuary and Houses of Hope have supported around 600 people seeking asylum since the program's inception. Bapcare receives no government funding for this housing service, and we need help to continue this work.
We've invested our heart, soul and funds into the Sanctuary and Houses of Hope program for the last 14 years. Unfortunately, we find ourselves unable to continue to support the Preston Rooming House at its current or anticipated future costs. It's with heavy hearts that the Board of Management have made the difficult decision to close the Preston Rooming House in February 2022. We remain committed to playing our part to support people who came to Australia to seek refuge. We will continue to support the 80 people seeking asylum in the Brunswick Rooming House and our 16 Houses of Hope in the community. Community-supported housing is a great way to have more people involved in supporting the individuals and families at risk. Closing Preston will reduce the amount of housing services available to people seeking asylum, but our hope, with your help, is to grow the number of Houses of Hope so that we can care for even more people than we're currently doing. But we can't do this alone. We need help from partners like you.
As a caseworker, we are working with our residents to support them in living in our community in the most effective way they can, that they are living safely and comfortably and finding all of the supports and resources that they need to be able to do that. Typically when residents first move in, there can be some very immediate and quite urgent needs, some very fundamental needs.
Getting involved in a House of Hope is an incredibly enriching experience. You get to travel alongside people who are really struggling to survive in Australia. You're meeting real needs and you grow as a church.
Houses of Hope has been an incredibly positive experience for my church. It's given us an opportunity to put our faith into action. And the relationships between our volunteers and the members of the church and the women and their children in our Houses of Hope has just been so positive. We really love them, and Houses of Hope has been such a gift to us.
Together we can make a difference to people like Yasmin.
I'm from Burma. I'm Rohingya, Bengali Rohingya. Burma is not safe for the Rohingya people. I was pregnant, so I was living in there, and when that happened, like they start telling us like, leave from here, you don't belong to us here. You make Burma like very dirty, so they killed them. They burned their houses. Before we left, the broker said the journey will be safe and easy to get there. From the first day, we realized that the journey is not a safe thing.
Together we can make a difference to people like Yasmin. Will you partner with us to help?
Lord, we cry out to you. Change the atmosphere. Breathe new life in all who gather here. 'Cause we are blessed to bless the world in peace. We are loved to love with.
Well, thanks, Jonathan, for joining us at Ashburton Baptist Church. But firstly, I want to ask John, what's your sense of the times that we're living in? You know, besides this pandemic, there seems to be lots going on. What are you seeing, and what's your sense of what's happening?
Well, it's a big question, Tree. We are living, I think most people sense we're living in very turbulent times and very difficult times and quite scary times, really, in lots of ways. We're seeing fracturing in things along a whole lot of different fault lines, internationally, within our own societies and nations, ecologically, very strikingly, and and even within people, the sense of fracturing, particularly in the affluent countries like Australia, the sense of people unraveling themselves. So I think a lot of things are unraveling together, and I think that's no accident. There's probably a bunch of chickens coming home to roost there, really, that have to do with the systems that we've been living by at the global level. So I think if you're feeling the weight of the times, then you're seeing what's happening.
What's God's vision for life, and how has it gone wrong, or how have we not really lived into that life?
Okay. Look, I'll give it in its biggest picture, because that's the quickest way to do it. God's vision for life is of shalom, that great Hebrew word, of all things in right relationship, all things in communion, within the great communion of love that God intends for all of creation, and for creation to have with God. So that means, so for us as humans to individually to be in communion with God, but with each other as well, within the communion of love, but also in communion with creation, and creation in communion with God as well. This wonderful picture of all things reconciled, and that's what the Bible in 2 Corinthians tells us is the work of God in Jesus, is to reconcile all things in the whole cosmos back to himself, to bring back into relationship. That's God's vision, and what's happening, what we see happening, really, I used that word fracturing before, is precisely the breakdown of relationship all over the place. And I mean, that's been happening. That's the human condition, right? That's the fundamental story at the beginning in Genesis 3 is when humans begin their fracture in the fracture of their relationship with God, and immediately experience a fracture of relationship with creation and with each other. At that very point, the fractures happen all at once, and we're seeing that work out. And particularly in late modernity or postmodern times, the times of, say, late consumer capitalism, we're in the midst of what is really a hyper individualism, or a radical individualism is the dominant worldview that even amongst Christians, I'd say, we're all affected by it more than we know, which means that the lens by which we think about everything and all our actions, we consider and weigh, even morality, things like that, it's all through the lens of me, and that represents the fundamental fracture of how we are created to actually be in relationship with the whole, and to be asking about the question, not what's good for me, but what's good for the whole. Because in God's great economy, what's good for me is actually good for the whole. And that's where we've got it wrong. We think if I need to focus on me, and that's in our language, right? I need to do what's right for me. There's a continual refrain, and actually doing what's right for me continually actually works out to be ultimately wrong for me, because I'm not considering myself in relationship, which is who we are created to be. And that's, in a very deep sense, I think what's going wrong, Tree, and that's happening in our relationships, in our politics, in our economics, in our culture, everything that's playing out.
And so what do you think are some practical ways in which household and communities can participate or practice that change that narrative?
That passage in 2 Corinthians, which I mentioned, 2 Corinthians 5, where it says, in Christ, God is working to reconcile the cosmos back to himself. The thing it says next is that we are ambassadors of this message. We're being called in to be people who take on this message. That's what the work that's been given to us to be people who are reconcilers of the cosmos. That's sort of a mind-blowing sort of idea, isn't it? And of course, it's too huge for any one of us to even think about or get our heads around. But at a very small level, what is, I think, really helpful to understand is that what the fundamental vocation of followers of Jesus, people who are following Jesus, and that means taking on Jesus's work, taking on the way of Jesus, are to be people who are rebuilding relationship, rebuilding connection between people and God, between people and creation. And that's our work. And that's, firstly, before we try and take that out into the world, that's the work of our own lives. And there's no division in my reading of the New Testament between how we're called to live and our mission, our outward witness and mission to the world. They're fundamentally bound up together. Yeah. So we're called to be reforming connections, so our own daily lives and also home economies. So that's going to be our focus. There's lots of ways we can think about this, but it's, I think, really important to start on the home front, where we live, with our houses and our households, and how we fit into this bigger picture. And that word home economy, it's a bit of a tautology actually, because the word economy comes from the Greek oikonomia, which just means the management of the affairs of the household. So economics is a word that's all about households, how we run our households. And at the net, we think about economics at the government level, and it's really the household of the nation, how they're managing that. But in our own homes, it's how we manage the affairs of our own households. And we think of that as a very different thing, but actually they're fundamentally integrated. Or households, our actual homes, are the base unit of the broader economy. We're embedded within the national economy, embedded within a global economy. Our households are part of that and interacting. And the whole global economy itself, human economy, is embedded within a much bigger economy, which is the great economy of nature, which we call ecology, which is another household word. So ecology comes from that same oikos word from the Greek word house. It describes the set of relationships that form up this big household of creation. So our households, we need to understand our households as embedded in all these other households. And our households are also embedded, if we're Christian people, hopefully, within another household, the household of God, the household of the church. So in one way of thinking about the church is as a household of households, if you like. So we're embedded in all these households. And how can we live in our household that sort of expresses our relationship at all those different levels? How can we live in ways, particularly that seeks to restore care and love to those relationships? So that's a huge question, and it's to some extent the work of the rest of our lives. But there are some pretty important places to start, I think. So one of the things I would say is critical for starting to take care for our relationships and how we relate to all those other parts of the picture is to begin where Jesus begins in his teachings about money and wealth, which is with the scary word renunciation. We need to be people who can learn to say no to things, because we're, particularly us, because we live in this glutted consumer culture of overconsumption, and it's all about more, me. And the thing we need for health more than anything else is first to be able to begin to learn to say no to some things. And the reason for saying no is not because we're called to be otherworldly and disconnected, but it's actually saying no for a much bigger yes that we want to say, which is for the world. So we need to be people who reject essentially the big idols of more and me, and the practical ways that we do that are, well, there's a number of different sorts of elements of that. So at the heart of things is really beginning to apply the ethic of, let's call it the ethic of care to all the different elements of our lives, showing care for our relationships through our economic lives. So if we think our economic lives are made of production and consumption and distribution. And so work, we work to produce things to get an income. So we need to be people who start to show care for what work do we actually do in the world. If we are people, and many of us are people who have the incredible privilege of being able to choose some form of work, we have some choice in our work, which many people in the world don't, by the way, but we get to choose. So if that we have that great privilege, then there's also the responsibility to be asking, well, what am I doing with that work? How am I expressing care for the world? How am I, in some way or another, serving humanity or serving creation, serving the whole picture? So that's really important, rather than just seeing work as something where I seek to earn lots of income for myself or gratification of a career or something like that. But how can I serve essentially through my work? And I mean, the great news is that there are just thousands of ways we can serve the big picture, and which suit the many thousands of forms of people that we are, the diversity of humans that we are. There's as many ways to serve the world as well. But that has to be the lens that we think about. What about our consumption? So there's lots of ways we need to think about taking care in how we consume, and there's a whole bunch of practices that come under the umbrella of either called ethical consumption or responsible consumption. And really, there are a set of practices, a set of guidelines for helping us take care for when we spend our money in the world. What's it doing out there? And actually seeing our consumption as expressing a form of relationship with a chain of people. So there's people who made stuff, people who transport stuff, people involved all along the way, people who retail stuff to us. And then there's the stuff itself that came from the earth somehow. What's the impact on the earth as well? So trying to show as much care as we can that in our consumption, people are treated well. And creation is treated well, at least as well as we can. And that at the base level, we want to try and, if we can, to do no harm, and at best to actually be involved in positive relationships with people and the earth. And so there's a whole the world of ethical consumption is a bit of a rabbit hole that you can just go into it. We don't have time to unpack all of that, but I'm sure many people have experienced some, a lot of people start with buying fair trade or buying organic produce or something like that. But there's many different elements to it. And there's devil in the detail as well. There's complexity, but there's a whole world to be explored there. Revalue the work of the home. Actually, we've got into a culture where we want to just see our homes as places of luxury and rest. And not as places of work, actually. And I think that's actually not a good way to think about our homes, that they're just places where we consume, but actually to re-embrace the work of the household, which is the work of producing and bringing in food and things. And there's always work to be done to maintain households. And so in Western history in the last 100 to 200 years, that's often been foisted on women. So a big part of reclaiming the work of households is for men to step back into households and reclaim, much more proactive part of the work of the household, and to see joy in the work of actually caring for our own family members, and to see actually that this is productive, meaningful work to do the things that have to be done to express the care for our family. And the other reason for that is when we invest more time in it, we can actually make choices which show much more care for creation. We can better use of resources and better consumption choices. Perhaps the final thing to say is we can begin, particularly in churches, and I think churches are great places to explore this, is to begin to rebuild forms of economic connection with other people. So forms of cooperating together in economic life, which we've lost largely with basically individuals within a great global market. But actually getting together to do things like whether it's share tools and lawnmowers and whippersnippers and things like that, or to form co-ops for bulk buying co-ops to be able to buy more ethical food, which is often more expensive. So if you get together, you can make it cheaper. Things like that, which actually form a different element of relationship to us, because we're not just choosing relationships, but we're doing things based on our preferences, but we're doing things together which are good for each of us. And we're starting to need each other for some of these things. So look, Tree, in the end game for me, as people in the affluent world, the affluent Western world, the end game is that we need to somehow be people who can find ways to choose less, actually to live with less and live more simply. Although that's a very complex term, actually, living simply. But so we have to lower our consumption levels. That's what the planet needs from us. If we're to show care for our human neighbours and for our non-human neighbours in creation, that's what we need to do. And actually what we need is not to be people who place less value on material things, because material things are the goods of creation. What we need to do is to place much higher value on material things, such that we are much more grateful for that we have, and we don't need to have continual just stuff going through our houses and then ending up in landfill within a week or two. That we can be happy with less because we value it so highly. We see more clearly how good it is, and to be content. So, you know, what we're being called to with our practice of money is to be content, to live within limits, to be called to be people who are living with respect to the other, to the world, with our money. The household covenant is a tool that my ministry, so Manigum's the name of the organisation I run, has put out there. We've borrowed it and developed it from a group in the US that we have some connection with. And essentially, it's basically a tool for making, as a household, decisions in the direction that I've been talking about. And so very simply, the household covenant just names 7 areas of household life. Is in each of those 7 areas, and you can do this on a yearly basis, or you can just do it once or every now and then, whatever you like. But in each of those areas, to name one goal, that one thing you're going to change. And the trick is to not to make goals like, I'm going to sell all my possessions and and start again, because generally we don't succeed at those sorts of goals. But to be a goal that is achievable for you, that you know you can achieve, that you can begin to make some movement. Because
thanks, John. Really appreciate your insight and getting us to help understand better the invitation of God for life that is nourishing and restoring. But it's not just good for us, but for the rest of the world. So I appreciate very much this conversation, and hopefully we can get you back physically one time, and
that would be nice,
from the workshops that you do well.
Bring heaven to earth, Lord. Bring peace where there's fear. Bring life where there's death, Lord. Joy in these tears. Bring love where there's lust, Lord. Bring hope where there's pain. Bring rest where there's chaos. Bring faith where there's fame. You invite us to partner with you, to see your kingdom come. We are blessed to bless the world in pieces. We are loved to love where love is not. We are changed to be the change you promised. We are freed to be your hands, oh God. Bring home to the homeless. Bring keys to the chained. Bring worth to the purchased. touch to the shamed. Bring freedom from debt, Lord, and to excess. Bring closer your kingdom through quiet success. In the broken we shall see restored the image of our King. We are blessed to bless our world in pieces. We are loved to love where love is not. Hey, we are changed to be the change you promised. We are free to be your hands, oh God. Lord, we cry out to you. Change the atmosphere. Breathe new life in all who gather.